Uh, I think you are, once again, a guest who needs no introduction, but I'm going to do it anyway. Mr. Matt Headroom.
Matt Headroom.
Yeah, it's Sunday.
Never going to escape that one, apparently.
Yep. Raised in Peterborough, Ontario, so not quite a hometown boy, but just a little bit that way. A man of many parts, a graduate of the Old Vic Theatre School in Bristol. Too many movies, TV shows, and stage productions for me to remember on a Sunday morning. Most recently, Moloche and Watchmen. Very impressive. I thank you again for being here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And I thought, just as a change of pace, I'm going to start you off with the first question, because I heard you and Don were talking about Twitter. And I think it's very interesting. You are actually the first icon of the internet age, but 10 years before the internet came about. And how does that strike you? Having played a character like Max Headroom, who was alive on the net before there was a net, and now the world has caught up with your work.
Yes, I had no awareness of the way computers work, and I still don't. And I think, and anyway, Icon sounds like a brand name of aluminum. So I'm, it's great, but because the character provided a certain anonymity because of the rubber makeup and so on. I always sort of felt as though I was on the outside of a bubble looking in, and you kind of, I always felt as though I was competing with Max to a certain extent. So I'm envious of him, but we're both a size 10. So next.
Done.
Oh, it would have to be me. Okay, let's talk about Max Headroom since you're here. We're playing.
Sure.
Did you find the makeup sort of liberating? A lot of times in mask work, makeup frees an actor to pursue parts of sort of themselves that they normally would be able to access. Was it empower? I hate to use that thing,
empowering, but you did, and you said Twitter earlier on.
I didn't say it in endearment, though.
Yeah, good. Well done. I'm going to use it then. No, it's it was. I think it was probably liberating, because. I mean, people always say that mask work does kind of sort of free you up. That worked for about the first week, and then it became a complete pain in the ass. Because it was rather like being on the inside of a tennis ball. I mean, you were just kind of, and when the rubber mold was fired, if they injected too much water into the rubber mold, it would evaporate off, and then it would have the consistency of leather. So it was like you were wearing a catcher's mitt, and so underneath the mask, you'd be going, hey, but what would come out was so you're always sort of fighting this thing. I mean, it was quite weird, but I mean, Max was an amazing thing for me because I arrived in Los Angeles playing these two leads in a very high profile show, and I didn't have to do any pavement pounding. So it was a great thing for me, and I never really realized how well it was doing until kind of after it was over, because it was sort of 15, 16-hour days every day, and I'd finish up doing the Edison character at about 2 o'clock, and then get into drag to play Max, and then everybody would go home, and then I'd take a further hour and a half to get my makeup off, and it sort of became apparent to me what was happening. I think when I was going down Venice Boulevard late at night, and I stopped in at a Taco Bell to get a late night snack, and I came out at 1 o'clock in the morning with this burrito, and I squeezed it too hard, and the whole thing kind of on this big pile of bean curd that looked like a big pile of steaming turd on the hood of my rented car, and I remember staring at it for a couple of minutes and thinking, that's what my life's become. I just sort of left it there until I returned the rental car. It became this kind of hood ornament. But it was great. It was a fantastic thing to kick off my career because it was the first sort of big cherry that I had. So
So
Yeah.
the earliest memories I have is when Max was just like a between time like video host type of thing, and I
Yeah.
have VHSs from the '80s, and I was like, I gotta record this,
yeah.
And what was the concept that they put forth then? You were like, how did they pitch this?
Well,
You're
I was an
doing
actor
this.
working over in London at the time, and the two people that well, actually, the guy that came up with a concept for it was a fellow called George Stone, and he borrowed the idea from NASA because the notion for Max Headroom was based on a character called User Friendly, who was a kind of a computer-generated man for NASA doing in-house training films, and they thought this could be kind of cool, and will perpetuate the ruse that it's actually a computer-generated man when in actual fact it's a guy in rubber makeup and this enormous fiberglass suit and these sort of frisbee-sized contact lenses, and we started doing this video show. Like I was hired to pump pump Chrysalis Records artists abroad, and they wanted something sort of mid-Atlantic and stuff. And then I started ad-libbing more and more, and they thought, well, maybe what we could do is introduce some live guests, and it kind of evolved into this talk show whereby publicists in London at the time were pushing their clients forward to pump their movies and their albums, and in the process get roasted by Max. So it sort of became this kind of this trial by fire, to kind of get skewered by Max, but still you'll get your product out there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Andre?
Yeah, Max Headroom was just great stuff. I enjoyed that. I want to skip ahead a couple of years further. You did a couple of years after that little show on CBS that, frankly, I think is one of the 3 best comedies done in the last 20 years.
Oh, thank you.
Doctor.
Yeah.
And again, going to the VHS, I was taping those things because I went, this thing is just so brilliant.
Yeah.
And
Thank
any thoughts, memories, anything on that you have?
Well, it was weird because Norman Steinberg, who was the executive producer on that, who co-wrote Blazing Saddles and My Favorite Years, so obviously the guy knows his way around comedy. He said to me, whatever you want to do it. Ad lib, improv, go crazy. I was like, oh God. So he was a kid in a candy shop, and so right from the very first show, the way it sort of evolved this way. We would do one take on the script and then 2 off, and I would improv a couple, and then we would put it together in the edit. And I finished up that show because we only did 40 episodes, foolishly thinking that every show would be like that. So I went on to this next show, and I started ad-libbing, and they were like, oh, what the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? And I was like, well, this is the way I do it. And it's, oh, okay. And eventually they sort of came round to it, but I was sort of wrestling with them the whole time because, not to toot my own horn, but I felt that the ad-lib stuff was funnier than the written stuff. I mean, it was definitely getting bigger laughs in front of the live audience. So, it became a very frustrating exercise that stuff would never make it into the final edit. So, long story short, Doctor, very fond memories of that, and everybody on the show could have had their own show, and I was just fortunate enough to be